Early in the morning, Nishino Akane wakes up with the help of her alarm and takes a shower before checking out herself in the mirror, and she looks gorgeous. Afterwards, she gets prepared for the day at school, but she sees flashes of paparazzi as soon as she opens the door. Her personal driver snaps her out of the trance and takes her to school, where she's welcomed by most of the students. However, she soon spots Kagino, a boy she hates because of his ordinary looks and below average grades. And so begins this love story, hopefully. She greets him and he returns the gesture, but calls her Nishimura, which doesn't sit well with Nishino, even though she hides it with a smile. She reminds Kageno that her name isn't Nishimura multiple times, causing Kageno to apologize. He reveals that he's pretty good at remembering the names of all the important characters, but he's not so good at remembering named NPC. He then adds that he hasn't got much sleep and calls her Nishitani. She gets angry once again and corrects him before revealing her actual name, but Kagenu once again gets it wrong and calls her Nishimura as he leaves, which infuriates her. While she watches Kagenu leave, Akane notes that she doesn't despise him even though he got her name wrong, but she hates him because he never looks at her. Although his eyes are always facing her direction, they seem to be looking somewhere far away. In class, Akane gets all the attention, but she avoids associating with Kagenu as he's always acting weird. It turns out Akane took a break from show business due to a scandal back in middle school. Ever since that incident, Akane has been hiding behind a mask she has created. She plays the part of being the teacher's favorite and the most popular girl in school in order to get everyone to like her, as she tries her best not to be hated by anyone. Akane was in middle school. She had to take a break from the show business due to a scandal. Elsewhere, Kagenu reads a mysterious book and tries to learn its content to gain more power. After school, Akane calls her driver to pick her up from school, but he doesn't pick her up because he has been attacked by some thugs. After waiting for a long time, Akane is forced to walk home late at night, which is her first time doing so since the incident in middle school. On her way home, she's attacked by the same men that beat up her driver. She tries to run away, but they catch up to her in no time and kidnap her. She starts to lose consciousness after being drugged, but she sees Kagenu approaching. Shortly after, Akane gains a consciousness and realizes that she's tied up in some warehouse. One of the kidnappers reminds her that the daughter of Nishino, Zabatsu, shouldn't walk alone at night, as her father has lots of enemies. While he talks, his accomplice informs her that she just needs to stay there quietly and that she will be freed once the ransom payment has been made, which leads to an argument amongst the thugs. Meanwhile, Kagenu watches the kidnapper before he changes his clothes and puts on a mask. Soon after, one of the kidnappers tries to have some fun with Akane and reminds her of the first time she was kidnapped by a stalker, causing her to remember the tragic events. She tries to resist him, but he hits her and prepares to have his way with her. However, Kagenu comes crashing down through the roof window, revealing that he is a stylish ruffian slayer, which makes the kidnappers angry. He pulls out a gun, but Kagenu attacks them with a piece of glass, injuring his arm and disarming him in the process. He then engages the thug in battle, knocking him to the ground and smashing his face brutally. And I thought he was supposed to be doing the smashing. The other kidnapper sees that Kagenu isn't an ordinary man and states that he has been bored as hell being a kidnapper with amateurs since he was released from the army. He then takes out a knife after dropping his gun and attacks Kagenu, who is excited to fight an ex-military officer. After getting cut on the arm, Kagenu manages to disarm the man with a crowbar, but he still gets dominated. With no other option left, he decides to get serious and show the thug the potential he found in crowbars, after fighting bikers that disrupted the peace of the city. Kagenu turns the fight around and stabs the thug with a crowbar, making him realize that Kagenu is Balaclava Berserker, a man who has been fighting the bikers with crowbars. Kagenu then reveals that the bikers started wearing helmets in order to protect themselves, prompting him to stop using the crowbars like Tonfa, but as a regular club instead. Kagenu launches at the criminal. He breaks his leg and beats him up brutally as Akane watches in horror. After ending the man's life, Kagenu frees Akane and tells her to be more careful next time, but she doesn't realize that she was rescued by Kagenu. Not long after, she calls the police and her father uses his connections to prevent the case from going public. The following morning at school, Akane spots Kagenu and greets him with a smile on her face. He greets her back, calling her Nishino, but she doesn't realize that he got her name right and tries to correct him. Surprised, Akane feels like Kagenu is finally looking at her and deduces that he's also living a life behind a mask. However, the next day, the news reported that Minoru Kagenu has been hit by a truck and did not survive. In the past, Kagenu has always dreamt of being a hero and spent his days training, but at school, he was just a background character. Although Kagenu reached a point in his training where he can beat up some guys, he's helpless in front of an armed men. Kagenu decides to become the best martial arts in the world in order to beat up those armed men, but he's still unable to do anything about a missile. Despite having no superpowers, Kagenu wants to overcome those limits and save the world by becoming a powerful being. After being hit by a truck, Kageno is reborn into a new world and forms an organization. With his squad and newly acquired magical powers, Kageno prepares to start a mission. He states that he wants to be the one who operates from the shadows, showing everyone their greatness, the eminence in shadow, even though he wants more power. Later on, Alpha reports to Kageno, now known as Sid, stating that he was telling the truth and that she found a description of the cult of Diabolos. Many years ago, after dying in a car accident, Minoru Kageno is reborn as the son of Baron Kageno, an aristocrat living out in the boonies. Despite being so young, Kageno quickly understands his new world and senses that there is magic in the air. Kageno's new family has been making dark knights, who can enhance their abilities using magic. And they have high hopes for Claire Kageno, Sid's older sister, who is quite talented. Sid grows up as a background character, being an average knight, and tries not to draw any attention to him. But he comes out at night and fights bandits. With a slime sword and bodysuit in his possession, he easily kills the bandits and takes their treasure. Shortly after, he finds a cage with a rotting creature and quickly realizes its potential as the magical creature it possesses. Sid takes the monster home, where he shoots it with magic and performs other experiments on it as he tries to contain the magic overload. After a month, Sid succeeds in containing the magical overload and the creature returns to its normal form, a young, beautiful woman elf. Trying to make a good first impression and recruit the elf into his team, Sid decides to put on an act as she regains consciousness. He informs the elf that broke the curse that has been put on her and all her heroes' descendants. He then shows her a fictional book about 3 heroes who defeated Diabolos, but the demon placed a curse on them with his dying breath. Furthermore, he explains that the cult of Diabolos is plotting to revive the demon, even though most people have forgotten about Diabolos. He then introduces himself as Shadow, who lurks in the shadow and hunts shadows, preventing the cult from raising their master. After making up the whole story, Sid asks her if she would join him, and she agrees to help him fight the darkness, having lost everything. However, she explains that they need to find more heroes' descendants like her and expand their organization. Sid agrees and names the organization Shadow Garden, and calls the elf Alpha. 3 years after, 13-year-old Sid practices with his sister and lets her defeat him, even though he's stronger than her. Claire is now 15 years old, which is the age that the nobles start attending the Midgar Academy for Dark Knights. However, on the day of her departure to a new school, Claire disappears, leaving her room in a mess. Meanwhile, Alpha has collected more members for its organization in the past 3 years. After discovering that his sister is missing, Sid asks Beta about Alpha's location, and she reveals that Alpha is looking for a clue that will help them find Claire. Beta explains that Claire is probably still alive, but she has been kidnapped by a high-ranking member of the cult of Diabolos, as they believe that Claire is one of the hero descendants. Beta then takes out a map and states that although the cult has a few unknown hideouts, she doesn't know the hideout Claire is being held in. While she talks, Sid makes a slime knife and throws it at the map. He misses the hideout completely, but states that they will find his sister there. Beta then figures out the cryptograms are a bluff, as there's a secret hideout at the location pointed out by Sid, and he tells her to contact the 7 Shadows. Elsewhere at the hideout, Viscount Grease keeps Claire bound with magic sealing chains. He states that her father taught her how to fight, but Claire confesses that she developed her skills by fighting her brother. Grease then asks if he healed her when she showed signs of possession, but Claire denies it, stating there is no way a weakling like Sid can heal her. However, Grease decides to investigate Sid, which makes Claire furious. In an instant, Claire breaks one of the chains, injuring her right arm to free herself, and she threatens to kill him if they touch her brother. Despite her threats, Claire is visibly weak, and Grease knocks her out easily, before being informed that there are intruders in the secret hideouts. Meanwhile, Grease's men are easily decimated by the 7 Shadows. While destroying them, Alpha reveals that they are Shadow Garden, and their mission is to annihilate the cult of Diabolos, causing Grease to wonder how they know that name and its secrets. He attacks Alpha, but she blocks his attacks with ease and injures him. She informs him that she won't kill him until they get answers from him, but Grease takes a pill that boosts his magic after being overwhelmed. He manages to escape, but Alpha tells the girls not to chase him as Shadow is after him, which is the reason why they split up. Elsewhere, Shadow is lost and is unable to find the girls. He decides to explore the tunnels and encounters Grease moments after. He attacks Shadow, who dodges his attack after breaking a sweat. Shadow then confesses that Grease has more magic power than Alpha, but doesn't know how to use it. He decides to give him some lessons and blocks his attacks, making Grease look like a chump. Afterward, Shadow attacks Grease and starts cutting him, forcing Grease to wonder if he had ever been overwhelmed in battle just like this. Refusing to give up, Grease tells him no matter how strong he is, the darkness in the world is much bigger, but Shadow states he will just dive deeper. With no other option left, Grease takes more pills and buffs himself even more, as he wants to prove to Shadow that people are worthless, fragile, and powerless. He attacks Shadow with all his might, but he manages to block his attacks and fatally injures Grease using a large number of magi. As Grease fades away, he notes he was powerless against the darkness, but maybe the shadow was strong enough to face it head on. The next day, Claire returns home in a foul mood. Miraculously, her wounds healed overnight, and she departs for the academy immediately. Although Sid is eager to go to the academy, he has to wait for 2 more. He decides to give the girls some work, but Alpha tells him it's time they leave him, which surprises him. Alpha tells Sid that the Cult of Diabolos is a large organization that runs on a global scale, and the only way to fight them is to split up. However, Sid believes that the girls want to be free and no longer want to play this fighting the cult game. 2 years after, Sid turns 15 and he enrolls in the same academy as his sister in the royal capital of Midgar Kingdom. Despite being in the academy for several months, Sid continues to live as a background character and becomes friends with Skell et al. And Poe Tato, other unpopular nobles like him. One day while walking to school, Skell and Poe inform Sid that his punishment for getting the worst score on the test is to confess to the most popular girl in school and suffer her rejection. Not long after, at school, they spot Princess Alexia Midgar, who rejects another guy's confession. Despite the humiliation, Sid is excited about his confession because he wants to experience such confessions as a background character. Later that day, he decides to confess to Alexia, but he starts to shake and mumble his words, even though he believes that he did a great job as a background character confession. Alexia accepts his proposal, stating she has been waiting for someone like him, and this surprises Sid. In no time at all, the rumors quickly spread like wildfire, and people start to wonder who Sid really is and how he was able to have someone like Alexia. Meanwhile, Sid, Skell, and Poe wonder why she accepted, and they realize that Alexis accepting Sid's proposal means that they also have a chance. Alexia then joins them at lunch, which surprises other students as their table is labeled the lower nobility section. All of a sudden, she receives lots of food and states that she can't eat it all. Upon hearing this, Sid starts eating her food happily, as he wants her to dump him because all of the attention he is receiving. Alexia then reveals that she is studying Royal Bushin fencing and wants to practice together with him, as he is also in the class. Sid explains that he is in the lowest sections, but Alexia insists that she puts a good word in for him, and she got him a spot in Section 1. Later on, Sid joins the Section 1 team, and their advisor is Zenon Griffey, the official royal fencing instructor. During training, Sid practices with Alexia, but quickly notices that her attacks never land. He also notes that she's slow and doesn't use magic much, but eventually figures out that the purpose of the practice is to review these strokes and counterstrokes. Although he finds her techniques great, he believes that it is boring, but doesn't tell her. After training, Alexia commends his good fencing style, but also dislikes it because it feels like looking in a mirror. Alexia tells Zenon that she is Sid's girlfriend now, but he informs her that she is still betrothed to him, even if it's a secret from the public. After listening to their conversation, Sid discovers the truth and decides to play along till he fades back into the background. Afterwards, Sid confronts Alexia about needing someone to help her get out of the engagement with Zenon, and chose a low-class aristocrat like him, who she could easily control. After Alexia confesses, Sid states he doesn't want any more attention, revealing that he isn't interested in getting mixed up in her problems. However, Alexia states that he is being too cold towards her, even though he knows he faked his confession to her after his friends told her everything. She then blackmails him that if the student body finds out about this toying with a young girl's heart, he will not see a peaceful day in the academy. Alexia decides to continue the boyfriend act until Zenon gives up, but Sid informs her that he may not give up so easily, because it's clear to everyone that he is out of her league. Alexia states that she needs to buy some time before she can deal with the situation. Alexia then takes out and throws a gold coin at Sid, and asks her if he looks like someone that can be bought. However, Alexia throws another coin, causing him to jump and catch the coin with his mouth, thereby acting like a dog. Sid notes that his parents' allowance isn't enough to carry his eminence and shadow operation, and he decides not to let this chance slip away. Afterwards, Sid continues being her boyfriend and is delighted that the students are more focused on Alexia having a boyfriend and not him, which allows him to be the background boyfriend character. Although Alexia acts well-behaved in public, she constantly badmouths Zenon. Sid decides to not argue with her and just agrees to everything she says. Sid wonders about Zenon's bad behavior. Alexia states it's easy to pretend. She states that she also judges people by flaws, but Zenon doesn't have any, which is not normal for a human. On their way home, Alexia tells Sid that he has the fencing basics and nothing more, but she can't take her eyes off him. Confused, Sid tries to figure out why Alexia is so different today, as her fencing is unusually aggressive and sloppy. Alexia then reveals that she always wanted to be as good as her sister, but she lacked the skills and she decided to become stronger than by herself. They ended up calling Alexia the fencing ordinaire, but states that it is unfortunate that Sid's fencing is ordinary like hers. However, Sid doesn't find it unfortunate and states he likes her fencing. Alexia reveals that her sister told her the same thing after she suffered a humiliating defeat at the Bushin festival. But she couldn't understand how pathetic she was feeling. Sid cheers her up, stating that he isn't a great person and wouldn't care if someone kills 1,000,000 people. However, there are things that people find worthless, and they are the most precious things in life, which is why he likes her fencing style. Alexia draws her sword and asks him what he means by that. Sid then reveals that he gets angry when people disrespect the things he likes. The train stops and Alexia leaves. She bids Sid goodbye, making him believe that it is the end of this unwanted relationship. Later on, Skell and Poe apologize to Sid for telling everything to Alexia, but wonder how far he got with her while they were dating. Sid states he didn't do anything with her, which makes his friends angry at him, as they would have done different. At the school gate, Zenon and 2 other men stop Sid and his friends. Zenon states Sid should know that Alexia didn't return to her dorm last night, and they are investigating it as a potential kidnapping. Furthermore, Sid was the last person seen with her, and he is now their first suspect. After he sees more knights approaching, Sid surrenders and realizes he's in big trouble. Alexia is being held prisoner bound by magic sealing chains, and she wonders who is behind her kidnapping. She thinks about the possible culprit, but she spots a deformed creature cursed by the Demon Lord, which makes her sad. Not long after, a crazy scientist comes in and reveals that he finally has royal blood in his possession. He quickly takes her blood with a syringe, and Alexia questions him about the use. The crazy scientist reveals that her blood is the demon's blood, but states that he doesn't know what that means, as he is just the messenger sent to extract her blood. Elsewhere, Sid has been stripped off his clothes and tortured for the whereabouts of Alexia. Even though he can handle the physical pain, Sid starts to beg for his life in order to conform to his role as a background character. Meanwhile, the crazy doctor continues to drain her royal blood, greatly weakening her to the point of death, but Alexia refuses to give up. She decides to provoke the doctor, prompting him to attack the cursed creature, and feeds her after noticing that her blood level is low. The following morning, Princess Iris invites Zenon into her office and commends him on his efforts to find Alexia. She reminds him that their topmost priority is the rescue of Alexia, and questions if Sid is capable of incapacitating her sister, due to his lack of skills. She instructs Zenon to release him, but keep him under close watch as he is still a suspect. Devastated about her sister's kidnapping, Iris reveals that she is powerless to save her sister, as the council believes she might be the next target. But she asks Zenon to help her maintain order at the academy. While they talk, Claire causes a scene on school grounds, demanding that they release her brother, as she is too dull and weak to kidnap the princess. After the meeting with Zenon, Lisa thinks about Alexia, who is currently in a terrible state of health, as the crazy doctor keeps draining her blood for his evil experiments. Later that day, Sid is released from prison and thrown into the streets without his clothes on. On the train heading, Sid thinks about healing his wounds, but states that it wouldn't be a very background character thing to do, as he's wrapped up in his own delusions, and he's trying to play his role well. At home, Sid is graced with the presence of Alpha, and reveals that it has been a while since they were together. He wonders why Alpha is here, even though it is Beta's turn to be his personal assistant. But Alpha reveals that she came back after receiving a call. She informs him that they are very close to finding the cult, and the organization's influence is growing every day. Even though they are still weaker than the cult, Alpha then informs Sid that the cult is responsible for the kidnapping of Princess Alexia, and the Knight's Order will blame him for the crime, as they are working for the cult. Sid discovers Alexia is still alive, as they need her royal blood because of its high concentration of hero's blood. But not for long. Alpha informs him that the organization is going to help him solve this case, and scolds him for not trusting them enough. Alpha advises him to lay low, but before leaving, she asks him if he wants the soldiers killed. He tells her that they were only doing their job and they deserve a reward instead, but she's not happy about his decision. Later that night, Sid meets with Delta, who informs him that they have been able to mobilize 114 members for battle, which shocks Sid, as he did not realize just how much the organization had grown. Delta reveals that the plan is to launch simultaneous attacks on all the Fenrir sect hideouts of the Diablos cult scattered in the city, while they search for Alexia at the same time and bring her home. She informs him that Gamma will be in charge of the mission, while Alpha will be leading the troops into battle. However, Sid overrides their plan, stating that the world will feel their presence tonight. Outside, Sid encounters the 2 soldiers that tortured him, but he kills them brutally after mutilating their bodies. While Delta writes down his exploits, Sid continues to decimate the members of the Night Order, forcing the mad scientist to test his weapon, even though it's just a prototype. He injects the cursed creature with the blood of Alexia, despite the princess's warnings, and she gains tremendous power. She kills the scientist with her blade and breaks Alexia out of her chains. Unable to control her power, the creature runs wild into the streets, causing the people to run away in fear. Meanwhile, Alexia heads for the exit, but she's confronted by Zenon, who reveals that he is responsible for her kidnapping, and the doctor works for him. Alexia is happy to hear this, as now she no longer has to marry him. But Zenon reveals that he now has her blood and the research of the crazy scientist, which will guarantee him the 12th seat in the rounds. He states that he would have preferred Iris's blood as she is stronger, but he had to settle for her. Enraged, Alexia engages him in battle, but he mocks her technique, prompting Alexa to reveal her ultimate technique. However, he defeats her with ease and knocks her down to the ground before mocking her for being weak. He decides to kidnap her once again, but Sid arrives just in time, surprising Alexia in the process. He prepares to battle Zenon and reveals his true identity as the shadow that lurks in the